The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Zhou. Ray is the co-founder and co-CEO at Affinity. Ray, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. Ray, let's start with yourself, please. Could you give us a bit of an overview of your background and your journey in technology, from where you got started, some of the roles you've held along the way, and take us up to the formation of Affinity?
It's interesting, actually. I think my journey into technology started with a journey in science. I was very passionate about science. I grew up in a family of scientists. For the longest time, I thought I was going to be just a hardcore biologist, and that was my life dream and my life passion. I don't know if you've ever worked in a wet lab before, JP, but it was just a very different world. Like when you're having to deal with like reagents and wait for your turn on the PCR machine and whatnot. Like in general, like I felt like progress in a lot of fundamental research. It's difficult because there are fundamental physical constraints. Like it's pretty slow. And I remember in my senior year of high school, that was when I wrote my first computer program. And it was just such a mind-blowing moment for me because it felt like I was finally using like a tool of the 21st century. It felt like you had lightning at your fingertips. The only thing that was constraining, anyone in the world who knew how to program, write software and everything, from building something, coming up with an idea, like it was really just their own time and their creativity, and there were no other constraints. You didn't have to wait for permission to build what you were passionate about. And so that's really what kind of hooked me in, and I think since then I studied computer science at Stanford. That's where I met my co-founder, Shubham. And in a lot of ways, it was to some degree the birthplace of Affinity. We kind of were founded out of like the computer science department there. We really hit it off. We met while we were studying together. And I would say between my co-founder, Shubham, and me, we became really close friends before we even founded the company. Like it was just such an improbable encounter. I'm calling right now from the Bay Area in California. It's pretty much like I'm basically a Bay Area life. I've spent my whole life here. Shubham grew up in New Delhi in India. So that was quite an interesting kind of intersection of paths, but I think that made it all the more special, right? And a lot of what we bonded over when we were studying together was just all these shared interests in technology, society, where is the future of the world going? And I think more than anything, like it was these core values that really bonded and tied our perspectives together. And so we started working on Affinity because it was actually a combination of serendipity and intentionality. Like before building what ended up becoming the flagship product, we worked on a lot of just various random side projects together. Funnily enough, like probably the least serious and silliest things that we worked on seemed to be the ones that had the most traction. But the company kind of emerged from, we had met all of these like incredible thinkers and builders and investors in Silicon Valley in our time at Stanford. And those people opened our eyes to what we now call as a company the relationship-driven economy. So what started out as this like summer of like very benign intros and conversations that we were having with people in our network that they were introducing graciously to other people, that grew into this deeper set of conversations and explorations. And we basically at some point wanted to understand like what do these people do for a living? And we realized everyone has one thing in common. They basically manage relationships for a living. And so that kind of begged the question, how well is that working today? Can technology play a deeper role in helping people, helping firms build more meaningful, more valuable, more powerful relationships? And those questions ended up being the spark that gave rise to Affinity. So I actually never finished my degree at Stanford. They're very gracious and lenient about, allowing students to go off and build their own thing. That was maybe 7.5 years ago, I think. And yeah, it's been a humbling and crazy ride since then.
Thank you so much for sharing the journey, and it's great to learn about the bond you and your co-founder formed, which then led to the launch of Affinity. And many a great startup has been built out of Stanford, and a lot of CEOs decided to go all in on the company before they completed their education. So you're not alone there. So you hinted at what Affinity does as a product. So tell us all about Affinity, what you do, what the mission of the organization is, and then we'll jump into the underlying technology behind it all.
You can think of it as it's a next generation CRM, customer relationship management, and relationship intelligence platform for deal makers. So we are basically the tech stack that powers, I think today, north of 2,500 institutions in over 80 countries, largely across the financial and professional services world. So you think industries like venture capital, private equity, banking, corporate development, M&A, consulting, real estate. That's the universe that we help. And we help deal makers in those industries find, manage, and close their most important deals by leveraging relationship intelligence. The thesis behind the company is, there's a couple of things. Like one is we really think when you look at it, like the biggest and most important industries and economies in the world are really driven by relationships. Like this is pretty universally true, but across all these industries, especially, it's a people business, right? It's a human business. How effective you are, it's all about how good you are at maximizing, understanding, capitalizing on your network. That is the most strategic asset that every partner across these different industries owns. And the way it extends to the broader world, it really inspired us because in many ways, like at the outset, we were learning about a lot of these different sectors and how the world worked as well. When you think about it, relationships are everyone's most valuable asset, right? There's very few assets that, literally countable on one hand, probably. Like how many assets are there that you build up throughout your entire lifetime that you take with you throughout every, from school to school, job to job, every internship, every, decision in your career. And that pays off like a lifetime of like impact and dividend. So it's a very universal problem, basically. That's what really inspired us. Our vision is, we talk about this often, is how do we build a world where everyone in the world, doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a student out of college or if you're a Fortune 500 CEO, where everyone can cultivate and fully harness their network, their relationships, their most valuable asset to succeed. And maybe we'll talk about this in a bit, but basically we started Affinity. We realized there was this sort of technology paradigm shift that was on the cusp of happening. This is about like 7.5 years ago, where if you can leverage all this existing but wasted relationship and network data that everyone in the world already owns, but no one realizes they own, you can use that to build this platform that's going to enable 10x better versions of products that currently exist, both for firms and companies, and ultimately for, we think, every professional individual in the world. That's a very powerful idea. That's what inspired the company.
Yeah, and 7.5 years later, it's been incredibly successful. I think that the information that I have available is over 1,800 customers in 70 countries, and you're working with some of the biggest brands across all the industries: Bain Capital, SoftBank, Nike, just to name drop a few of many. I want to talk about the how. From 7.5 years ago when you came up with the concept and you built the early models to where you are today. What's the journey been like? What's the behind the scenes look like, particularly focusing on the use of AI, data science, machine learning, analytics? If I was a member of your data team today, what would the environment look like? What's a typical project?
So I think to answer that, kind of we have to go back to like, what is the magic behind Affinity, basically? And for what it's worth, that potential is what inspired the company in the first place. It's the reason we built it in the first place. So the central idea that we have at Affinity is basically we realize if you want to transform the way that people manage their relationships and solve many other problems, the secret to doing so is by leveraging all this incredibly rich data that technically everyone in the world already owns, but no one is like really capitalizing on the value of. It's really interesting. So for example, JP, if I were to ask you, of all the data sets that you have access to, right, which one actually captures the most accurate and powerful and rich source of truth about your relationships, like the people that you know? And if you ask most people down the street that question, they would say, maybe I have my contact book on my phone, or individually, I built my LinkedIn network. If you're a company, you'd say we've got a CRM where we use to manage all of our relationships with our customers and clients, and we use contact book software as well, and we have spreadsheets. The problem with all those systems is that they're all manual. If you have the diligence to spend like hundreds of hours sitting in front of your computer, like entering manually every morsel of data about every relationship that you have built and are constantly building like every day. So what we realized was actually all the sources of truth are wrong. Like when you think about it, the only common denominator, the most powerful common denominator between all these industries and ultimately everyone in the world is that we use the same tools and protocols like email, calendar, text, calls, etc. Like these aren't just ways for us to talk to each other. They're also data sets, right? By virtue of you or me or anyone in the world being a normal human being, like sending out emails, scheduling calendar events, etc. It's spewing out this ocean of really powerful, really unstructured waste data that actually technically would paint the most powerful picture of people's relationship. Who do I know? Where do I know people? Why do I know them? And the insanity that we realized when we started the company was all the data is going to waste. It's crazy. Everyone has access to this. It is the richest, most unstructured source of information. You can build all these incredible things on top of it, and no one's using it. And so that's kind of what inspired the company. Basically, what we do at Affinity is we've built this data infrastructure that kind of like taps into all of this like otherwise wasted data. And then we build this kind of layer on top of that transforms it, learns from it, stitches it together to generate these really rich and powerful insights, which then power the next gen CRM that we built and everything that we're working on right now. So to answer your question, like what are the kinds of problems that we work on? It's really across every end of that spectrum and stack. The basic idea is like, how do you tap into all of this really rich metadata, natural language data captured inside the subjects, the bodies, the titles of events and emails, et cetera, and use that to produce and generate insights? Can we understand how strong a relationship actually is between two people? Can we classify introductions? Like what's introduction? Who introduced you to who? Like these are the types of things we're able to build and work on. So I think it's an incredibly interesting, set of problems, and the sky's really the limit. There's so much that you can build on top of this data set, and we only barely scratched the surface. And we've already, even what we've done so far, I think the market has really recognized the value of. So there's a lot more potential there.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
I want to now talk a bit more about the people that you've brought in, particularly again focusing on the technology side, because it's a very complex problem that you're trying to solve, bringing together all these data sets, a lot of engineering, a lot of analytics, data visualization. Speaking to an audience of AI professionals who listen in to learn about companies, how would you describe the environment, the team? What sort of people did you bring in to make all this possible? And give us a bit of insight into continued growth and what opportunities there could be for other people.
100%. Yeah. It's funny because I think the way I'm going to answer that is in a more universalized way. I guess what I mean by that is the principles that we've learned over the years in terms of what does it mean to build great people, build a great team, really emphasize great people, great culture. It's not just constricted to, engineering or AI. Certainly that's an area that we focus a lot on, but it's very universal. So one thing that we say a lot at Affinity, actually, and very unapologetically, these are the most important pillars to us, is the people and the culture. And by the way, you can't have like 5 most important pillars, right? You can't wake up on Monday and the most important pillar, the North Star for the company is this, and then like on Tuesday, the North Star is something more important. It's got to be one thing. And at Affinity, it's really the people and the culture. In a lot of ways, because when you think about it to some degree, like everything that a company does, every like brilliant idea that we have, how can we better leverage this data? What's a new type of insight that we can build, or a new classifier we can build on top of what we have? Everything that we sell, every service that we create, every experience we create for our customers or users, for each other, it all flows downstream of the people and the culture. So from a founder perspective, there's no higher level that you can, more upstream layer that you can really think hard about and design. So people and culture are really central to Affinity. And I actually, between my co-founder and me, we made lots of mistakes as we grew and scaled and everything. It was really the culture that got us through. So I think speaking a little bit more to it, something that we often talk about at Affinity is we're really trying to build what we describe as an idea meritocracy. So it's a low ego, like very humble culture where we're not obsessed with like titles or hierarchy. We're really obsessed with this passion for finding out what's true. Like what are the best ideas, right? How do we allow and build a culture where the best ideas can win and where they can come from anyone? It doesn't matter whether you're a machine learning engineer who started 2 weeks ago or if you're the CEO of the company, right? There has to be this very intrinsic curiosity for always understanding like what is true, what's not true, et cetera. And what that means is that the way that historically, like we've thought about generating and sharing new ideas, reacting to ideas is it's never been about who's right and who's wrong. Everything is taken with an open mind. All disagreement is an open, collaborative exploration of what's true. And I think that ends up fostering an environment where really the best ideas can flourish and where everyone feels really empowered. Everyone feels it's not a culture where your ideas or people are shut down. That was a really critical thing. The other thing I really mentioned as it scaled up is, and this is a bit of an intangible thing to say, but the people at Affinity are good people. That's really the way I would describe it. We care personally about each other. I've often thought about this, but for a company where so much of what we're doing is in data science, in this AI space, it's really easy to think that, okay, automation and these insights are going to end up doing away with a lot of what people do. But ultimately, we're all human beings, right? We're building products for human beings. We're human beings working with each other. And so to build a great culture has to start with everyone in the company really acknowledging that everyone else is a person with a beautiful life story and life dreams. When you talk to any 2 people on the team, whether it's a coworker on the ML team or on the data science team, et cetera, like everyone has like a unique life story, a beautiful life story for how they got to doing what they're currently doing. And so a great culture is one where everyone has this like really innate and intrinsic curiosity for wanting to learn that about each other. We're getting to know each other as people, as opposed to just the code that you write or the pull requests that you make or whatever that might be. So I think those are really the elements of, I can keep going. We've got a set of core values that we thought a lot about how we kind of evolve and grow and put into practice at Affinity. But I really credit like the success of the company and all the traction that we've seen. It's not about like from a top-down perspective, like what the founders have done and thought, et cetera. It's really about having built an environment where great ideas can flourish and come from anywhere within the company, and really recognizing that and capturing that. That's what's gotten us to where we are.
Yeah, I appreciate you being so candid about that. And the phrase there that stuck out to me was the idea meritocracy. It reminds me of the Ray Dalio book Principles, which I know is something he's very big on. Yeah, I'm guessing that might be where you got it from.
That actually is where it came from. Yeah, that was one of the most formative books I'd say I read in my journey as a founder.
It's a great read for anyone listening who hasn't checked out the book. Please do so. A lot of words of wisdom in there. So, Ray, I want to stay on the topic of people then, because clearly it's something you're passionate about. It's something that you value and you credit a lot to the success of the business. It's incredibly competitive right now and has been for the last few years, in fact, to attract top talent within AI, within data, who also fit the mold of the culture that you've built and trying to build. So I want to use this as an opportunity to gain some insight into how you've gone about attracting these types of people to your company. So when you're sitting with candidates, or whether it be virtually or in person, and you're explaining the mission, the environment, the type of work that's going to be challenging and fulfilling, what is it that you're telling these amazing engineers and scientists about the work at Affinity that's got them interested enough to join you guys over some of the other great opportunities available to them?
I think it's a great question. I'd say a couple of things. The first thing is that chatting with different people, everyone's different. And so I think different people are looking for different things. And that's definitely something to embrace and not something to forget. A few things. One is, first of all, more broadly speaking, like great people beget great people. So I think having an incredible team, like really brilliant and talented team, like it's actually interesting. It's core to the mission and the vision of the company. But like when you have incredible people and they have an incredible network, it creates this like network effect and this like downstream effect where other folks join as well as a result of that, really hearing that. But I would say it's really two things. And not to say that necessarily Affinity is like the only one or unique on these two vectors, but I think ultimately the thing that we really emphasize when we talk with like candidates is a combination of some of the most like interesting, challenging problems in terms of applied AI and applied engineering. As I mentioned earlier, the volume, the potential, the power of the data it's so massive, and the opportunity of what you can build on top of that has really not been realized. There's these incredible conversations I get into when I talk with amazing engineers, whether they're considering a job at Affinity or not, where when we just start brainstorming, like what becomes possible when you have access to this data infrastructure. Because ultimately it goes to show like relationships are so universal. Everyone's got some sort of a problem or a pain point around, I'm not spending enough time catching up with like people I want to be spending time with or leveraging my network most effectively. You can easily go down a rabbit hole of quickly realizing there's so many workflows and so many types of things that people do, products that we use, et cetera, that could be much, much better if we were able to leverage all this data exhaust, this waste data. So the problems are really interesting. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's very easy to get into a brainstorm or a rabbit hole about what becomes possible. And the sky's the limit. My perspective on that is yes, like we need to build these things. That's exactly why we're doing what we're doing here at Affinity. So one is like, I think very uniquely as Affinity, the size, the scale, and just like the sheer applicability of the problems that we work on, that's something that resonates with a lot of people. Again, we're not the only one company necessarily out there that has that property, but it's certainly been the case over the past years of building and bringing the product to market. And the second thing is the people. It's interesting. I think like culture is an easy thing to talk about at the very high level, like what are your core values, et cetera. Something I hear a lot from candidates that have gone through an interview process, whether they are at Affinity today or they're not, they've often talked about how palpable the culture feels and the culture is like through the interview process, through their conversation. Culture isn't like the list of the values that you write up on the wall or all the rituals that you do. It's like this like unspoken set of things. It's the way that the actions that people take when no one's looking, right? It's the way that people talk and the kinds of questions they ask and their intrinsic curiosities and everything. That's something that's pretty intangible, but you really feel that as a part of an interview process to understand what is it going to really be like. So that's also something that I think is very unique to Affinity that we built up over the years. And that really speaks to folks when we chat with them. So I guess maybe more broadly for the audience, if those are the things that you're excited about or passionate about, solving like really significant real world problems, like building a massive company and transforming some of the biggest industries in the world with this ultimate ambition of putting relationship intelligence in the hands of everyone, and you're passionate about doing that with a really amazing, authentic, like genuine people who care, who have this like passion for craftsmanship, who want to seek the truth and figure out what's true and allow the best ideas to win, Affinity is the place for you.
Ray, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. Really appreciate you sharing the journey of Affinity, your own background included, in particular, the emphasis on the environment, the culture. Obviously, what Affinity is doing is really unique and very successful, but it really stands out as a great place for people who are interested in working in tech and having an impact. So I appreciate you sharing your story. We look forward to seeing what you guys can accomplish in the months and years ahead, and we look forward to getting you back on the show in the future.
Thanks so much, JP. Yeah, it was great to be here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.